Hi everyone, my name is Erin Hardick. I'm the lead research analyst at Zpryme, and I am here in the Austin ERCOT offices with CEO Bill Magness. How are you today, Bill?
Doing well.
So you have been in the energy industry for about almost 25 years now, is that correct? What has been the biggest surprise since you entered the industry to you?
You know, the thing that surprised me the most when I first got into the industry was the electric industry produces one product, basically, right? Lights, power, air conditioning. It was very interesting the way that the regional differences between parts of the country, and now I've learned more parts of the world, have formed the different energy markets we have. The legacies of things that happened, going on 100 years ago as various electric systems began in different parts of the country continue to have a role and continue to have an impact on how we produce our energy and the way that our markets are structured. So I think appreciating those differences, even though there's so much that we have in common and so much the same, the way that the history of our industry has shaped the present and the way we deal with the current challenges facing us.
So let's talk about some of those differences. The Texas grid in ERCOT is very unique. Can you talk about some of the uniqueness of the grid and kind of the environment that it creates in terms of innovation within the Texas grid?
The key thing that is unique about the ERCOT grid within North America is that we are completely managed by the state of Texas. So our regulator is the Texas Public Utility Commission for all our wholesale market issues. We're still subject to NERC standards, as are others in the U.S. for reliability, but we do have this unique footprint within ERCOT. And it's about 75% of the land mass, but about 90% of the people in Texas are in ERCOT. And I think the thing that characterizes it the most is there's a singularity of purpose with one regulator, with one legislature, guiding our actions and our policies. It's in many ways easier to move things more quickly just because there are less people having to make decisions and set policies. So that's enabled us to do things like the competitive renewable energy zones, which is a tremendous transmission build out to the less populated regions of Texas that have good wind and solar resources, particularly wind. And our ability to, through the Texas legislature, decide that was going to be the policy, the Public Utility Commission deciding where those lines are going to go, along with our experts studying the best way to do it. That project was completed in an amazingly short amount of time, considering how difficult transmission investment and construction is a lot of places. So I think it does give us an ability to, once issues are aligned and the various stakeholders in Texas feel like we've got the right answer, we can implement and build the platforms to complete those policies pretty quickly and effectively.
Back in 2001, we passed Senate Bill 7 here in Texas, and we've really seen the adoption of renewables increase since they passed that bill. Can you talk about what the mass adoption of renewables really means for customers today?
Well, we've seen, Senate Bill 7 gave us a completely restructured electric market and opened up opportunities, not just for renewables, but opened up opportunities for retail competition for most of Texas. It opened up opportunities for fairly simple generation interconnection. So as new types of generation became feasible, more people became interested in investing in them. We provided the platform for relatively easy entry into this market and relatively easy exit as a deregulated generation market. So that set the stage for new entrants like wind and solar providers to be able to get into our market in a relatively straightforward way, to take advantage of the transmission system that we've developed, which reaches a lot of the places where those resources are best located. And so I think it allowed the development of renewables, but also allowed the development of a lot of natural gas, a lot of coal, a lot of other resources to come in. Now, as to how the influx of renewables affects consumers, you see impacts on pricing in markets when you bring in resources like wind and solar that don't have a fuel cost. And that affects the markets. The supports of those resources, whether it's production tax credits or investment tax credits, those as well affect the pricing and how it affects other types of resources in the market. And understanding that there are a lot of consumers who want to use a particular kind of energy to get their electricity. That's a fairly new development, that people feel like they're rooting for a particular resource. And you see a lot of corporations, municipalities wanting to be able to say that their power comes from wind or solar. And that's a development that we didn't see prior to the influx of renewables and has had an impact on the resource mix that we end up with.
How does the mass adoption of renewables create challenges around intermittency and control issues for you guys here at ERCOT?
Well, you know, when you're managing an electric grid, the central thing you have to do every single day is keep frequency at 60 hertz. And I think a lot of people don't appreciate this concept that, you know, in electricity, supply and demand have to be balanced within very narrow tolerances all the time. You produce it when you need it, right? And storage may change that in the future, but historically, you have to produce and consume at the same time. With intermittent resources, they're less controllable by grid operators. You didn't really forecast in the past what your coal plant or what your nuclear plant was going to do the next day. You told it what to do the next day, and it responded, right, unless it had some sort of mechanical outage. Whereas with solar and wind resources, we've had to develop tools, as well as our market participants, to forecast what are we going to see on the system tomorrow? What will cold fronts bring? You know, cloud cover can change your solar forecast very dramatically. So we've had to develop new tools in forecasting, new tools in the way that we manage the system as additional renewables have been added in order to continue to do that fundamental thing that we have to do every day with a different set of resources on the grid.
With the decentralization of the grid and renewables comes challenges of control and intermittency issues, but also a big challenge of cybersecurity. How important is cybersecurity to you guys here? How often do you think about it? Is it something that crosses your mind every day?
It's a mission critical job. Most everyone in the electric industry, anybody who has critical assets, whether in our industry or other industries, that you know, very bad things could happen if they're compromised, has to be thinking a lot about cybersecurity. And I think the thing that has changed even in the time that I've been engaged in the issue is, you know, it used to be people thought a lot about keeping out the bad guy. You still have to keep out the bad guy, but then you have to think about how am I going to be resilient if something does happen, because it can so frequently. What am I going to do to keep those systems running if we have a compromise? And then, you know, kind of going back the other direction, how do I make sure that I'm not introducing technology into my mission critical systems that came into my building with a vulnerability that could be exploited? So it goes to issues like your supply chain. This is something NERC has looked at over the last couple of years. Your supply chain for any kind of IT equipment has got to be thinking about cybersecurity. The way you train your people, because it is still people who are the most vulnerable to, you know, clicking on that link and letting a problem begin. It's how you train folks, as well as having a smart, up-to-date set of cybersecurity experts who are collaborating with security officials, with other people in the industry and the government to make sure we're on top of the current threats.
The cybersecurity conversation is certainly important, but you guys also face other types of security issues in your day-to-day operations. What are some of those other challenges that you face day-to-day, and how can some of the market players like the utilities or even the retail energy providers help you guys address some of these issues that you're facing?
Well, you know, fortunately for ERCOT, a lot of the security threats, the physical security threats, distinct from cybersecurity, go on in the field. And as a grid operator, we don't have a lot of assets out in the field. Our market participants manage those generation, transmission assets and do a great job doing it, but they face having to consider the physical security components of that every day. So, you know, I feel like it's more for us to try to help them identify anything that we're seeing in our role, whether things we're seeing from a cybersecurity perspective, things we're seeing on the system that can help them identify potential physical threats. And we, you know, ERCOT is a very good place to convene those sorts of discussions around what those common security threats are and find ways to address them.
One very popular topic within energy today is data and the amount of data, the availability of data, the aggregation of data. How can ERCOT leverage both existing data streams and maybe new data sources as they move forward to create better business processes within your organization?
Well, it's something we're spending a lot of time on now because ERCOT has, I often tell people ERCOT has two central jobs when it comes to data and information. One is there's a lot of market sensitive or grid critical information that we have to keep confidential. That's a critical component, that we don't let that information out to folks who may cause problems with it or decrease the trustworthiness of us as a middle person, in the energy industry. So we've got to keep information confidential. Our other critical job is to make information as transparent as possible. So depending on the information, we either need to get it out to the market using interfaces that are useful and understandable, because people rely on the information and data we're providing for their business every day, and at the same time manage to be able to keep information confidential when that's appropriate, when that's the best treatment. So doing that with the flood of information that is coming into our systems now is increasingly challenging. If anything, the amount of data that will be available in the electric industry is going to increase, whether it's through synchrophaser technology or other technologies that give us more and more information. Distinguishing the signal from the noise is going to be more challenging. And as a repository for and a provider of a lot of that data, we need to be thinking about what are the ways that we make it available that are friendly to the users, that can make it make sense, and get the most out of it. Because it's a tremendous opportunity for all of us to be able to see things and understand things through that data analysis that we never have before, but if we can't find a way to use the data to turn that data into information, we're going to miss that opportunity.
Data visualization is actually something that was talked about a lot at ETS 18, and Dream and Digital, this idea of taking this data and really creating something that we can learn in a learning environment from it. So what do you think data visualization will do for the industry in terms of unlocking potential solutions around some of these grid challenges?
I think data visualization is critical in that it just makes turning the data into information that can then be assimilated by our brains and made useful in language, it's central to that. And we've done a whole lot of work at ERCOT, particularly with our control room operators, in creating displays that make intuitive sense, that are attractive, that send the right signals, they're easy for people to digest, right? So those human factors in figuring out how we want to use this data are pretty critical. And if you're not thinking about the interface to the information, whether it's visualization or the way that you access information through websites and other APIs, then you're not going to be taking advantage of the opportunities that are available to, again, separate the signal from the noise and see that key thing that the data is telling you.
How can Texas residents keep from having those outrageous electricity bills as we enter the summer?
Well, one of the key advantages that Texas consumers have is that most of the state is in competitive areas where you can shop around for your electric service. So depending on what you value most in your electric service, there's a lot of plans out there that people can look at to try to manage their energy costs. And then from a ERCOT perspective, I always recommend downloading the ERCOT app. Our app is free on your favorite place to go buy apps, and what we provide is real-time energy information, real-time pricing information, if you're interested in that sort of thing for the ERCOT region, and it allows us to get that information out in very close to real time, and really more importantly in more urgent conditions, being able to push out notifications if ERCOT is requesting conservation. We don't do that very often, but if we're nearing an emergency condition on the grid, it can be helpful to us for consumers to know things they can do to adjust their energy usage to address that situation. So don't forget the app. And we're also on Twitter and Facebook and other social media outlets. So we try to get the word out, particularly as we're asking the public for anything they know what to do.
We're going through this big transformation. What excites you the most in the next 5 years as we look forward to the future of the grid?
Well, as you said, there's a tremendous amount of change going on. It's going on in the kind of resources that we use to get our electricity. It's going on in things like distributed energy resources. And the grid operator plays a central role in managing those transitions. And I think from a technology perspective, a data perspective, and a markets perspective, it's going to be a fascinating time to be in the industry and see what all we come up with to keep making it work.
Thank you, Bill, for sitting down to talk with us about some of these challenges around intermittency and control and cybersecurity. And I look forward to what the future of the grid holds. And thank you, everyone, for watching.